A recent X-ray image revealed a chilling secret. On the blurred picture, there was something unusual. A mummy surrounded by a strange arrangement of 16 severed right hands, grimly laid one atop another. The scientists working at the Palace of Avaris were shocked by this find, which points to a ritual aimed at depriving an enemy of power, practiced more than 3,000 years ago. This discovery is only one of the striking details contributing to the overall picture researchers of ancient Egypt are studying. The fate of the Great Pyramid of Khufu is a separate mystery, challenging time and common sense. We tend to assume that only time can bring about its ruin, yet the structure seems to defy both the record of time and human notions of what is possible. Many still find it hard to believe that people could have built such a monumental structure on their own more than 4,500 years ago. The pyramid, standing 146 meters tall, is the only one of the seven wonders of the ancient world to survive to the present day, and for that reason, it never ceases to astonish. It is not just a pile of stone blocks, but a repository full of secrets and undisclosed meanings. Recently, ground-penetrating radar scanning conducted on the northern side opened a new door into the past. Specialists discovered a secret corridor more than 9 meters long. Where this tunnel leads remains a spine-chilling mystery. Is it a direct path to the pharaoh's tomb, or a passage that holds the key to the Imagine the silence of this underground passage, where time seems imprisoned in stone and answers back with a barely audible echo. Although the pyramid rises in the sunlight, its inner life remains hidden from prying eyes. Mustafa Waziri, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities of Egypt, confirmed that the scanning will continue. This means that in the near future, researchers may uncover even more secrets of this unique civilization than were previously known. The greatest mystery lies perhaps the treasures there were not only stones and blood, but stolen memories, lost images and meanings, waiting to be restored. We will wait and see whether modern light can pierce the darkness of deep antiquity. Scientists made a remarkable discovery. In one of the cemeteries in Philadelphia, a burial was found containing a mummified body, beside which lay extraordinarily lifelike portraits of the deceased. These images were painted directly onto the linen shrouds that covered the dead. 2 portraits have been preserved in excellent condition, while 2 others were damaged by time. Experts note that owning such portraits in that era was regarded as a sign of luxury, so, in their view, they belonged to very wealthy people. Researchers also tend to believe that the works were produced by masters of the Alexandrian school, which explains the high level of portrait drawing and the realistic manner of execution. Such mummy portraits are rare and constitute valuable artifacts that provide direct visual contact with the faces of the long departed. Besides them, the necropolis yielded a statue of the goddess of love, and another, a seated statue of Aphrodite. The textual remnants offer insight into the social, economic, and religious status of the local population at the time, serving as an important complement to the archaeological finds. Obviously, the significance of this discovery needs no further proof. In another find, beneath Saqqara, the tomb of an unknown Egyptian queen was opened. The world has grown used to thinking that hell lurks deep beneath the earth, yet true darkness. In 2022, when the light around Tutankhamun's name was once again awakened after centuries of oblivion, a new door to the past opened beneath Saqqara. Remarkably, a once powerful figure had been forgotten for 3,000 years. Cold underground tunnels, saturated with the smell of old lime, led researchers to a bewildering hoard, to 150, no, to 300 stone sarcophagi of the New Kingdom. Each of those stone coffers, weighing hundreds of kilograms, seemed to illustrate the soul's journey in the spirit of the Book of the Dead. Their surfaces bore the faces of solitary men and women, and sinister details associated with the god Ptah Sokar. Of the many gray coffins, one stood out in particular, bearing the most chilling symbol, a sarcophagus adorned with a female visage cast in pure gold, a bright but hollow light turned into eternal darkness. That lifeless gaze resembled the mute scream of a forgotten power, left in the bowels of the earth. Inside the sarcophagi, in addition to petrified bodies, archaeologists found entire miniature worlds. There lay objects of various purposes, from sharp battle axes placed in statues of the god Saqqara to tokens and figurines of an ancient board game. These finds are not reduced to mere stone and metal. In each object were preserved the last imprints of people's faith. They remind us that however great one's power in life, when the breath stops, everything turns into a dream buried in dust. The key was the name, Nade, or the Night. This tomb was built for a queen more than 3,000 years ago. What drew the scholars was not the luxury or the mummy itself, but the fact that her identity and role in the history of ancient Egypt still represent a gap in the historical record. This is the story of a woman buried like a goddess, whose name had been erased from every stone tablet. One could say the greatest tragedy is not death itself, but the oblivion that befalls a person afterward. Sometimes it seems the most frightening thing is not the darkness of the underworld, but our habit of keeping silent about it. Thus is revealed the mystery of Queen Nate of Souls, whose name still awaits a return to the memory of people. And all of this unfolds in the legendary Valley of the Golden Mummies. If gold symbolizes earthly power, then the gold covering the buried is an attempt to buy eternity. In 1996, in the arid Bahariya oasis, the legendary archaeologist Zahi Hawass and his team cleared a doorway to another world. At the start of the excavations, they came upon 250 mummies, but as they moved deeper, they realized this was only an eerie prelude. In total, around 10,000 mummies were found in the valley. A silent army of the past, froze. Each deceased had been prepared in his or her own way, in 4 distinct styles, revealing an astonishing blend of life and death. On some sarcophagi masks and golden armor glittered, on others panels bore images of gods. Some lay in rough clay coffins, others were merely wrapped in linen. It was a symbol. The whole society, from the rich to the poor, rested shoulder to shoulder in silence. Along with the mummies, the archaeologist Hawass reaches one conclusion. The inhabitants of Bahariya in the era of Alexander the Great enjoyed considerable wealth and, in effect, bought themselves a ticket to eternity. It can be said that what was most valuable to them may not have been the glittering coins, but the unshakable faith that death is merely a transition to another form of being. If the tomb serves as the material testimony of an end, the unfinished Aswan obelisk stands as a monument to an unrealized dream. This enormous block of granite, which could have become one of the heaviest constructions of its time, lies motionless, as if frozen in time by a large crack down the middle. The paradox is this: the ambition to reach the heavens, in the literal sense, is pinned to the earth and halted by a single flaw. The main mystery is not the monumental size of the stone, but how ancient craftsmen shaped such masses without modern equipment, how they lifted and moved these incredibly heavy blocks when none of the known boats could have borne such a load. There remain far more questions than answers, and the void of historical memory breeds the boldest conjectures. Where conclusive evidence is lacking, skeptics often explain the phenomenon by invoking extraterrestrial. On close examination of the obelisk's surface, scientists found distinct semicircular depressions with straight edges, indicating the use of round tools in the stone's working. Even more disquieting were the regular, sharply formed protrusions on a lateral face. They are too large to be explained solely by human hands and resemble traces of some long-lost mechanism. It is quite possible that the ancient Egyptians possessed supporting devices or techniques that were lost over the centuries. In that case, the greatest loss of a civilization lies not in collapsed walls, but in knowledge and technologies buried with time. When we leave such a monument unattended, oblivion gradually fills its voids, and the truth becomes increasingly hidden beneath a layer of silence. It is perhaps the silence of this stone that holds the key to the skills once possessed by people of long ago, but no longer available to us. The sacred land of the East. On the eastern shore of Egypt, in the area once occupied by the Greco-Roman port of Berenice, Spanish archaeologists uncovered a temple dated to the 17th century. The ruins were named the Sanctuary of Falcons and attracted scholars' attention not only for their age but also for the finds inside. Within the temple, a massive altar was found strewn with the bones of 15 severed falcon heads, neatly placed next to their eggs. The motif seems ominous, but in Egyptian culture, the killing of a falcon was often interpreted as an offering to the sky. Along the Nile Valley, such sacrifices were indeed not uncommon, but to date there has been no recorded instance of beheaded birds being found inside the temple building itself, rather than on an open ritual site. In addition to the altar, archaeologists unearthed a harpoon, depictions of deities, small statuettes, and a stele. The inscription on the stele placed at the sanctuary entrance plainly warned, "It is forbidden to prepare a bird's head inside," which most likely was considered an offense. The exact meaning of this phrase, researchers propose several theories. Perhaps the beheading served as a sacrifice to Horus, the god of the sky and sun, or conversely, was an element of the cult of the moon god Khonsu. A symbolic interpretation is also possible, according to which such a sacrifice could have represented an offering of a defeated enemy. In any case, the find itself opens a new window into understanding ancient religious practices and forces a fresh look at the ritual customs of that era. The labyrinth of Hawara. The image of the labyrinth as a lost and terrifying structure existed for centuries in the legends and texts of antiquity. For a long time, it was regarded as a myth buried beneath the sands, until archaeological evidence began to confirm its reality. In 1889, William Flinders Petrie came across an artificially constructed mound and mistakenly took it for the foundation of the ruined labyrinth. However, the testimony of the ancient historian Herodotus, who claimed to have seen the structure himself, disproved the notion that the building had been completely destroyed. Herodotus described the labyrinth as a structure with a high stone roof, suggesting that it had not simply been ruined but was instead buried deep underground. According to him, it was a building of exceptional complexity and grandeur, rivaling even the Great Pyramid in importance. In Herodotus's account, the labyrinth had 2 stories and about 3,000 rooms, half of them below ground. Imagine the absolute silence and dense darkness that enveloped an entire complex of 3,000 rooms. These chambers languished in silence and gloom, as if buried under ages of oblivion. Then, in 2008, the National Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics used ground-penetrating radar to survey the site. The scan results stunned scientists. Beneath the layers of Earth, there really was an extremely intricate structure, a genuine labyrinth of numerous chambers, separated by thick, apparently granite walls. This discovery confirmed the very existence of the labyrinth, and at the same time hinted at something deeper. Perhaps the most ancient knowledge and the most astonishing secrets of Egyptian civilization rest within those walls. The question arises not only how one might penetrate such constructions, but why their creators chose to bury their grand creation underground. Remember also that the dead silence of the labyrinth is not simply an absence of sound. It is a challenge that modern people have not yet learned to meet. Another story is the ancient Egyptians were not only skilled warriors and master builders, but also people with a refined sensibility who loved festivities and entertainments. Recently, north of the ancient city of Hittani, now Amarna, Egyptian archaeologists unearthed 3 gold rings. Images of this deity frequently appear in ancient Egyptian art. He was usually shown as a dwarf jester, who not only brings merriment, but also serves as the protector of women in childbirth. This ring became yet another testament to how important this deity was to the ancient Egyptians. On the back of the piece, the words Sad and Plantavi are engraved, which are interpreted as mistress of the land. Along with the rings, archaeologists also found a gold necklace. The owner of this set of jewelry remains unknown for now, but excavations will continue in the near future, and the scientists will likely determine his identity. Another astonishing discovery is connected with the so-called Forgotten City of Gold. In the autumn of 2020, near the desert expanses surrounding Luxor, archaeologists uncovered a striking find: an ancient city more than 3,000 years old, preserved almost intact. During the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, from 1391 to 1353 BCE, This city was lively and bustling. Laughter filled the air, trade thrived, and everyday life of an ancient civilization prospered. In just a few weeks, archaeologists were able to reconstruct a vivid, living image of the ancient city. They came upon a bakery where the smell of old dough still lingered, administrative quarters where matters of power were decided, and warm, cozy residential neighborhoods where ordinary daily life unfolded. Many house walls were so well preserved they resembled picture frames, revealing the inhabitants' everyday existence. Numerous artifacts were unearthed during the excavations, ancient amulets bearing the imprint of those people's beliefs, ceramic vessels, gleaming jewelry, bricks stamped with the seal of Amenhotep III, and even mummified human remains. All these finds together create the feeling of a frozen moment where life and death seem to be suspended side by side. The dig's director, Dr. Zakik Havas, notes that this city is among the largest ancient cities ever discovered in Egypt. Professor of Egyptology Brian from Johns Hopkins University emphasized that the significance of the discovery is second only to the finding of Tutankhamun's tomb. The reason, he said, is that the unearthed city allows perhaps the truest story of that era is hidden not in royal tombs, but in the simple everyday lives of the people who built that great civilization. Looking at these untouched walls and household objects, we receive a clear message. Glory at the Temple of Osiris in Taposiris Magna, an archaeological team led by Kathleen Martinos discovered a hidden underground passage. The discovery amazed researchers and quickly became known as the geometric wonder. The passage is 11 meters wide, stretches for 300 meters, and is no more than 2 meters high. Inside the tunnel were found Ptolemaic-era statues, ceramic vessels, and other ancient items. Martino suggested that this underground corridor might lead to the tomb of the great Queen Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony. Although such a possibility is considered extremely unlikely, the Dominican archaeologist is making every effort to continue the excavations and try to confirm her suspicions. Separately, researchers also draw attention to protective tattoos on Egyptian women, which provide additional insight into the domestic and ritual practices of that era. You may be surprised, but women in ancient Egypt tattooed themselves before childbirth. Researchers from the University of Missouri and Johns Hopkins University found an image of the god Bez on the remains of 2 mummies, which has been interpreted as a protective sign intended to guard children and expectant mothers from danger. Similar images also appear on clay female figurines, which reinforces the view that this motif had a widespread symbolic meaning. Most likely, such tattoos were worn not only by the women. It remains an open question whether this ritual was a local tradition of a single settlement or part of a broader ancient Egyptian practice, and no answer can be given at present. The scientists did not unwrap the mummies. They examined only those areas of skin that had been exposed by tomb robbers, so the surviving fragments do not allow definitive conclusions about the custom's prevalence. The Rosetta Stone was discovered by a lieutenant of the French army in 1799 near the Egyptian town of Rashid, also known as Rosetta. This unique find was a large slab of granodiorite, weighing roughly 700. The stone bore a votive inscription in honor of King Ptolemy V, composed by Egyptian priests in Memphis in 196 BCE. The text was reproduced 3 times and rendered in 3 different writing systems. Because ancient Greek was known to scholars at the time, reading its version made translations into Latin, French, English, and Russian possible. Researchers determined that the 3 inscriptions essentially present the same formula, and it was the Greek version that served as the key to deciphering the previously unreadable ancient Egyptian signs. As a result, the Rosetta Stone became an extremely important discovery, opening the way for linguists to read numerous ancient Egyptian texts. The proverb, "Speech is silver, silence is golden," took on a literal meaning in the context of funerary rites during one archaeological excavation. In 2021, in the central Nile Delta, archaeologists investigated a previously untouched part of a small cemetery and discovered a disturbing, chilling detail. In one of the burials lay a 2,500-year-old mummy, in whose mouth gold. Such a find did not indicate the deceased's ostentatious wealth, but was understood as a ritual, metaphysical act connected with beliefs about the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians sincerely believed that the so-called golden tongues enabled the dead to communicate. This notion significantly changed our understanding of the complex and sacred funerary rites. It explains why tombs contain not only bodies and skeletons, but also items with deep ritual meaning. The place of eternal rest held far more than mummies and remains. It revealed a veritable treasure trove of history, from ancient ceramic jugs to gleaming gold scarabs and delicate depictions of lotus flowers. Rows of stone amulets, dating from different periods. The late period of ancient Egypt, the large number of gold objects still turning up in excavations, attests to a broader belief of that culture. The Egyptians believed that the gods had bodies of gold, and it was to deify the deceased that gold ornaments and ritual objects were placed in the burial assemblage alongside the interred. Symbols such as the lotus flower and the scarab, associated with rebirth, only reinforced this unshakable faith in the transformation and continued existence of the soul after death. The gold found again and again is perceived as material evidence of the hope for posthumous transformation, an attempt to attain eternity through ritual means. Perhaps the deepest mystery of the ancient gazing at these silent golden objects, we see not merely jewelry, but the human urge to leave a final word behind, to permanently fix one's status and memory. A discovery made during excavations added another grim but important testimony to these ancient practices. Two of them were found in front of the throne hall. The other 14 were discovered in 2 pits outside the palace. These fossilized bones date to approximately 3,600 years ago. Archaeologist Dr. Manfred Biatak confirmed one particularly sinister detail. All the hands found were right hands. According to ancient Egyptian beliefs, by cutting off an enemy's right hand, one could permanently deprive him of strength, power, and even a portion of his soul. The amputation took place in a sacred spot, and the severed hand was then buried, making the act not merely a military deed, but a ritual with deep symbolic meaning. Such a gesture deprived the opponent not only of a physical instrument of action, but, according to belief, of spiritual support in the afterlife. Warriors' hands served not only as weapons or trophies, but also as a means of counting. They were used to tally fallen enemies and, accordingly, the quantitative degree of cruelty. Many historians and popularizers tend to attribute this tradition to the Hyksos, who ruled Egypt from the 18th to the 16th centuries BCE, but no direct evidence of such a link has yet been found. Particular curiosity is aroused by the striking length of the bones found, to whom they belonged and why they were so enormous. These questions remain a chilling mystery, forever buried in the sands. Nevertheless, the discovery at Avaris is further confirmation of the ferocity of ancient warriors, and vividly shows the extremes to which people in antiquity went to conquer and hold power. Perhaps true strength lay not in the crown, but in the weight of severed hands sacrificed to obtain it. Looking at the 16 anonymous hands, we see not only traces of blood, but also the horrific price of power. One cannot help but ask, have modern people stopped trading power for cruelty? Or does this ancient dependence still live within us in another form? Turning to another puzzle, the mystery of mummification, we should revisit our previous. For a long time, mummification was regarded mainly as a purely physical method of preserving the body for the afterlife. But perhaps it was at the same time a metaphysical act, an attempt to elevate a person to divine rank. Modern researchers from the University of Manchester have put forward an alternative theory, arguing that mummification may have served as a way of transforming the dead into gods, and they voiced this view in February 2023 at the opening of the Golden Mummies exhibition. How did the scientists arrive at this conclusion? The mummification process is often compared to traditional methods of preserving, for example, salting fish, because after treatment, the body is covered with a white substance and appears to be preserved. However, it turned out that the material used was not ordinary table salt at all, but natron, a mineral extracted from the lakes of the Nile Valley. The critical point in the researchers' reasoning is that natron was used not only to preserve bodies, but also to anoint statues of gods and in ceremonies of sacred purification. As a result, the boundary between matter and the divine suddenly began to blur. This led the researchers to the troubling idea that by covering the organs of the deceased with natron, the Egyptians sought. It was once deeply believed that after death, a person did not simply continue to exist as a soul, but was transformed into a kind of deity, possessing a special status in the afterlife. This notion is striking in its scope and requires careful study, for it may explain the centuries-old practice of mummification more convincingly than other hypotheses. Perhaps humanity's true fear is not death itself. When we look at a mummy, before us appears not merely a carefully preserved body, but a striking testament to ancient people's desire to break free from the bonds of mortality and preserve at least a glimmer of sacred status. In each such image, one can see the will to endure, the urge to leave behind memory and meaning that go beyond mere biological existence. Our journey today tracing these discoveries draws to a close, yet the world still holds many mysteries waiting for their time and for future researchers. If you have any questions or doubts, ask them, and we will try to make time to address and discuss them. Thank you for accompanying us to the very end of this path. Goodbye, and until we meet again in future investigations.